Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on both Twitter and Clubhouse. You can also catch me on Instagram at Real Scott McKay. If you want to find the YouTube videos, you search my name, SCOTMCKAY. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com, and definitely come join us on the Facebook group, gentlemen, if you're not there already. It's not your typical agony aunt session where guys bitch and complain about their wives and girlfriends to each other and then talk about how macho and masculine they are. Nuh-uh. This is completely different. We have a lot of fun. We're relaxed. We talk about manly stuff and beautiful women, and you can join us by looking up the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. With me today is a friend of mine. This guy's like a lot of the guys I have on this show, it seems, sort of like my brother from a different mother. He and I get along on a whole lot of fronts. I was just on his podcast, which is called The Art of Masculinity. Great show. You guys should listen to it. He is from Charleston, South Carolina, and today we're going to talk about a topic that I really could put into words a lot of different ways, but basically people have stopped making sense. Men and women don't seem like they even understand themselves anymore, let alone each other. And we're going to talk about all of the ways that that has made life ridiculous and idiotic. How about that? So without any further ado, welcome to my guest, Johnny Elsasser. Welcome, man.
Hey, thanks, brother. Thank you for having me on. I'm super excited to jam out with you. It was really fun on my show and excited to see what we can drum up today for everybody.
Yeah, I have no idea where this conversation is going to head. Hopefully it's something, hopefully it heads somewhere more intelligent than idiotic. It's hard to have an intelligent conversation about idiocy, but we're going to do our darndest and see where the chips fall. What do you think?
That's going to be a challenge, but I think we're both up for it. And if not, just go ahead and commit this one to a failed podcast and we just sound like idiots talking about idiocy.
Well, I mean, I'm not ready to chalk it up as a failure just yet. We're just getting started here, but we'll reevaluate at the end. How's that?
Yep.
Yeah, your deal is masculinity and femininity, and we talk about that quite a bit here, and we had a lot of fun on your show breaking that down. And I have to ask you, what caused you to really get passionate about producing a show for men on masculinity?
Oh, man. It's such a great question. And it's one of the things that I was former special operations. I was a U.S. Army Ranger. And then I used to protect the ambassador to Iraq for 5 years out of Baghdad. So I was with the alphas of the alphas, right, for a lot of years. And I was myself. And when I came back home, I started seeing a few different things. One, I started realizing these guys peacocking, right, trying to act like they're alphas. But as soon as they're challenged by a real alpha, they just back down. But they're out there bullying other men. And then I saw men who were being bullied and couldn't step up into their own confidence and just own who they were. And the third was I saw the true alphas who were struggling to cope with transition to real life, with relationships, with themselves and everything else, being torn out of hostile environments. So I felt like from my background and credibility, I would start diving into masculinity and start just giving some tools for guys, calling out the guys who are out there bullying, calling them out as an alpha in this world and saying, hey guys, you're not actually presenting true alpha masculinity nor positive masculinity. And then helping guys along the way, either the real alphas kind of cope with some of the stuff they've been through in life, and some of the, quote unquote betas kind of finding their own strength in who they are. So that's in a nutshell what really drove me to be on this path.
Wow, there's a lot there. I think at least in the movies, when bullies are stood up to, they back down. But I'm not sure that happens in real life. A lot of people get their nose bloodied trying to stand up to a bully in real life, huh?
Well, this kind of goes to the idiocy of society today, though, because bullies can't be challenged anymore. Because if you challenge a bully, you get one of the new labels attached to you. You're either put into a courtroom and sued, or you're, slandered by media outlets. So it's like bullies are protected now. It's insane.
Protected by the anti-bullying movement.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like this is a great example of exactly where we're going to go today. You have this anti-bullying movement. Stop bullying in schools. And then anybody who challenges whatever their narrative is, well, they bully them. Basically.
Yep.
Yeah. How weird, right? So let's go ahead and level set this conversation. You and I were talking to each other about what to do for a topic, and we wanted to do something unique and perhaps hilarious. And we started talking about there's this kind of elephant in the room that people are acting like idiots with each other, pretending they're smart. And then they find an echo chamber of people who apparently believe the same way they do. And then they think together they've conquered the world and come up with this incredible smart viewpoint when really everybody else is looking at them going, you all are idiots, right? And as we were talking before we hit record on this particular show, we came up with a few key examples that kind of feel like they were harbingers of where our culture is nowadays. Kind of like, for example, the movie Idiocracy or the movie WALL-E. And it just seems like people are getting lazier. People are getting stupider. The narratives that feed the hive mind are getting less intelligent. And really, honestly, it seems like everywhere you go, the emperor just doesn't have any clothes on, right? And I am at a loss to how we got here, other than I really think a few people want to be able to influence the others at an elite level. And really, the more we can get the masses to believe things that are utterly stupid, the more power very few people have over the rest of us, because it just seems we're easily led at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you put it perfectly. And to really solidify the foundation in what you're saying, when we look at even today, not getting political, but you look at what the administration's done, you look at what they've said about COVID-19 and everything else, and then how they've contradicted themselves once they got into power, right? Once they became the administration for 2021, they constantly contradicted themselves and went back on things, but never actually asked for forgiveness or said, hey, we were wrong. And then people allow them to still drive their lives. And you're like, they literally contradicted exactly what they said 1 month ago, and you're still allowing them to tell you everything else. I mean, the stupidity just in that alone just baffles me. But that idiocy in today with people, it's almost like, I don't know if people have so much become stupid or dumber, or with the government having done a great job since, Mockingbird and Chaos and these other things that FBI and CIA ran since about the 50s to the, 60s, 70s. I don't know if they've just gotten so good at programming us that we're just so programmable now, right? It's like, that's the real question, I think.
I think people don't know how to see more than one chess move ahead. I think whatever
Very
people
true.
are told, they believe. They don't dig deeper. They don't go, what if? They don't follow a logical progression based on what they're told. For example, you talked about COVID-19 and what's going on politically with that. I don't understand how getting a vaccine became political. And with it, everything else in this life. For example, the vaccines, Operation Warp Speed, was a Trump administration thing. If anything, the vaccines are Donald Trump's. And you had the current vice president of the United States saying out loud that she wouldn't take Donald Trump's vaccine. She doesn't trust it. And then you had the current president of the United States going, oh, no, we're not going to mandate that somebody take the vaccine. We'd never do that. And nowadays, if you bring to light what was said by either of those two individuals, as I just basically quoted them, you're told you're a liar. You're told you're wrong. Oh, they never said that. It's like, look, I got video. Oh, that doesn't matter. It's like I was telling somebody recently about how during the 2020 campaign, Joe Biden is very gaffe prone, but one of the funnier gaffes was, we believe in truth over facts, right? But that wasn't a gaffe. I don't think it was a gaffe. I think he meant what he was saying. I think he does see a difference between truth and facts. And weirdly, it's the opposite of what he said he believed. I mean, they'll tell people facts knowing they're not true, but you're supposed to accept it as fact. Nowadays, of course, if you don't take the vaccine, you're assumed to be a domestic terrorist, aka a Trump supporter. When in reality, the actual fact is a lot of people who are people of color are most likely not to trust the government and are oftentimes the most resistant to the vaccines. Anybody who goes around talking to people realizes very quickly that it's not necessarily Donald Trump supporters who have not taken the vax. It could be most anybody based on their gut feeling about what's been going on, the way it's been positioned, and how it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. You know, kind of along the same lines, my wife and I can watch television at night and see commercial after commercial for pharmaceuticals where they say, ask your doctor about trifecta, you know, or whatever the drug's called, right? Some of the drugs, the names of them are idiotic. I mean, we saw one the other day. I said, I would not put that stuff in my body just based on the name of it. It's so silly sounding. And of course, they give a whole litany of side effects for this quote unquote FDA approved drug. And it says at the end of every commercial, ask your doctor about this. But you better not ask your doctor about ivermectin because you're a domestic terrorist. And ivermectin is horse medication. I mean, ivermectin can be a horse medication, but there's absolutely a human version of it. And lots of people anecdotally have felt better when they take it when they have COVID, but you're not allowed to ask about it. And I mean, either people felt better or they didn't. And hydroxychloroquine is, oh my God, dangerous. They've been giving people hydroxychloroquine as an anti-malarial since, God, World War II, you know? And it's just insane how people want to float facts that are really opinions, and everything has become a political narrative. Isn't it odd? I mean, what's going on there? It's idiotic.
Yeah, it's incredibly idiotic. It even comes down to the way that we look at health and the fact that people still will go out. What we know nowadays from so many different studies on health, that people will still go out and subscribe to buying McDonald's or buying the shit that's literally killing them inside. And you're like, wow. And you're also getting about zero nutrient benefits to it. And you're like, oh, okay. You wonder why you're on all these pharmaceuticals and there's a million commercials about them. Well, let's go to the fact that you're being told that you should go out and eat this crap wrapped in wax paper and think that it's going to be healthy for you. I mean, the programming even on that, the idiocy to think that any of that stuff's okay, to not just go and find some Whole Foods and maybe take 10 minutes to saute some vegetables and frickin' cook a piece of meat on your grill. Like, it's just, to me, it's just basic stuff has become, people are not even thinking about what's behind it. They're not thinking about the direction of it. And they're not seeing like how they're being programmed. Look at self-driving cars right now, feeding right into Wall-E, right? We kind of brushed on that when we were chatting before this. It's like, wow, look at the big picture. What is self-driving cars programming in the world? And some people might be like, oh, that's conspiracy theorists. Well, you know what? Go look up Operation Mockingbird. Conspiracy theorist was actually created by the CIA for that determination to say, oh, somebody's onto the truth. Let's go ahead and disempower them. They use that. That's a legitimate thing. But sitting there and saying, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist because you're looking at self-driving cars and it's a benefit to us. It's so helpful because now we don't have to drive. Really? Well, think about where that's going to take you, because Wall-E's kind of a big picture for this, but think about where that's going to take you. You know, these things, people subscribe to giving away their free will and control over their own life just for ease. And so many of our founding fathers and people in history throughout time have talked about giving away freedom for security, giving away your control over your own life, your autonomy for ease of what technology is presenting you. I mean, it's driving the idiocy in the thoughts in today's world, which is why people are allowing media and everybody else to just think for them, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, nowadays we live in a period of relative peace and comfort, which is unprecedented in the history of mankind. Yet everybody, so many people say out loud in public where other people can hear them that they believe this is the worst time ever to be alive. And, you know, racism has never been worse. Violence has never been worse. The economy's never been worse. The United States of America is the worst country in the world. For example, I saw a piece on the internet that ranked the worst countries in the world for women, and United States was in the top 10.
Apparently that person hadn't been outside of the United States.
Now, I'm a world traveler, and I can tell you with a straight face that is absolutely inaccurate. Okay. I could rattle off 40 or 50 countries where things are worse for women than they are in the United States. As you were talking, you mentioned WALL-E, and WALL-E is so prescient. People just laying around getting fat and being lazy, and your self-driving car takes you everywhere. I mean, we're headed in that direction. And also, as you were talking, we mentioned the movie Idiocracy. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that movie is how they're trying to grow crops with Gatorade, because of the electrolytes.
Yeah.
And the guy who comes from the past into the future says, why don't you just water the crops? And the people are like, water? That's the stuff in the toilet. I mean, what are you thinking? And I saw a meme the other day. And of course, famously, Joe Rogan, when he got COVID, used less than politically correct means to help himself get better. And the meme said, Joe Rogan injected himself with a fluid commonly used in vehicular cooling systems. And, the other side of the meme reads, I drank lots of water, as Joe Rogan quotes. And that's just what it's come to. Remember back when Al Gore invented the internet, but he never really said, I invented the internet. But of course, everybody who was politically opposed to him kept repeating that Al Gore said he invented the internet. I think that's the day the music died. I think when they got away with that, it opened the door for Donald Trump said to inject yourself with bleach, right? Or the very fine people on both sides thing. Or Kyle Rittenhouse took a gun across state lines when, it's been proven in court he did not. And people are still saying it because there are people out there who will still believe it. They'll carry the narrative. I've come to the conclusion that the powers that be, whoever they are, the elites, people who want to mind control us, play mind games with us, if you will, have just figured out how to word things so effectively in hopes we'll believe things that just aren't factual. Right? Doesn't it seem that way to you?
Yeah. If you go back and you look at the CIA's operation called Chaos, which was started in, I think, the 1960s, it was the same time the FBI started COINTELPRO, its counterintelligence program. They started both these in Southern California. And when you go back and you look at what they were doing when they started these programs to manipulate the U.S. population to basically have an adversarial view of the anti-establishment movement of the Black Panthers, right? And also of the hippies, when Charlie Manson, quote unquote, can be associated with potentially linked to MK Ultra and the CIA using LSD to end up rewriting somebody's mind and rewriting their belief in what actually took place and then what they're supposed to do. So there's a lot to this that the government's actually done, yet people still want to say that that's a conspiracy theory. Mockingbird has come out, and it was a program from the CIA which actually utilized the media to create things like conspiracy theorist terms like that. I mean, I believe in the 1960s, by the 1960s or 70s, there was about 250 CIA operatives in the media. Right. And these are things that you can go find if you search for them. And I'm not just pulling this stuff out. There's a great book called Chaos by Tom O'Neill, who actually researched this stuff for 20 years. And he's got a lot of stuff that he can resource and cite to. But when you start to look at these things and people still want to think that the government's looking out for them, listen, guys, from both sides of the fence, the right has been trying to control people for a while, and then it's flipped to the left, right? And it kind of goes back and forth. And right now we're in a position where a lot of what's taken place in our history is now being mobilized against society to create us to be idiots, to not be self-thinking individuals. You put this on my show really well, is that you're an individual thinker. You like to investigate. You're not on one side or the other. You're basically investigating, and then you create your opinion based on things that you read and then about the facts that you come up with. Nobody's doing that nowadays, or not a lot of people are anyways. Most people are just deferring to these systems and to these groups that have been training us to allow programmability for so many years, which is now creating us to be idiots in health, idiots in belief in what's true and what's not. We've talked a little bit about, and we can dive into it a little bit. I'm not well versed in it, but I did listen to a podcast on how these bots now are part of the institution of the media and of things like Facebook and of other websites out there that these bots are going into, and they're not even real people, but people are believing that they're having conversations like individuals are. It's insane, but we're programmed to kind of believe this stuff now, and everybody's hook, line, and sinker these days.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. First of all, the bots trolling people and real people trolling each other. Basically, trolling is clickbait. Trolling keeps people engaged. Arguing, having somebody disagree with you, showing you things on social media. Twitter is infamous for this, by the way. Showing you things on social media that are just guaranteed to raise your ire and piss you off keeps you engaged, keeps you on the platform. And yet it makes you miserable. It ruins your whole day. It makes you depressed. It makes you angry. It gets your blood pressure up. It's bad for you, but they don't care because they're big tech and they're in business. It's the almighty dollar. The term conspiracy theory has come up several times as you were talking. And my thought on the term conspiracy theory is like a bunch of other terms. It's engineered to create an emotional response. Anything that involves thinking a chess move or two ahead that doesn't fit one's own narrative can be conveniently branded a conspiracy theory and, relegated to being ridiculous automatically. Another term that's a lot like that to kind of demonstrate how this process works is dog whistle. You've ever heard them use that? I'm sure you have.
No, I haven't heard dog whistle.
Okay. A lot of times when one political side or one narrative wants to villainize the other side, what they'll do is say, okay, when so-and-so said this, it was a dog whistle to their base. And of course, a dog whistle is a piercing noise that only a dog can hear. So in other words, no one else knows what they're saying except the people who agree with that narrative. So it's like code words, right?
Interesting.
But the power of the term dog whistle is you can very elegantly put words in other people's mouths that weren't there. So during the Trump administration, if you watched CNN or MSNBC, they used the term dog whistle a lot. So when Donald Trump said something that prima facie is pretty innocuous, they would position it as a dog whistle to his white supremacist base or whatever, and then therefore make it racist.
Jesus.
Because what they're saying is what he really meant to say was this. And if it matches up with your narrative and we all mutually dislike this person on the other side, we'll all agree and go, yeah, pile on. It's Lakers versus Spurs, Dodgers versus Yankees. It's my team versus yours. We've gotten on this show and said that, in a secular humanist society, really politics has become the new religion, which is why so many things that seem just basic in society and, and purely apolitical have become political. I mean, I honestly believe that Ford versus Chevy and Coke versus Pepsi are going to be Republican and Democrat, respectively, some point in the next 6 months to a year. It's just headed in that direction, and it's indeed an idiocracy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just everything's become. If 2020 showed us anything, and moving forward from 2020 showed us anything, is that whether you want to refer to political powers, you want to refer to the 6 families that own all media outlets in the world, you want to refer to whatever, right? But the powers that be have shown us that they can manipulate entire masses of societies and allow people to believe in what they say and then to dehumanize one another. Like, people can't even disassociate politics anymore from human beings. And it's like, if you and I didn't see each other on the same side of political views, you and I in today's society are virtually not allowed to be friends. Right. And most people see it that way. And you're like, well, what happened to us just being human beings? What happened to us just having, views about life in general? Like, politics are so minute. And this is where the power really resides, is when any small faction of people can convince the masses that they are no longer in control, then that small faction becomes the overarching power for every decision made. Right. If the people realize that, like, for instance, regardless of what side of the fence you sit on from masks, right? If everybody just said, no, we're not going to do masks anymore, and they just stopped wearing masks, guess what? I don't even care how many laws you wanted to put in place. You would never be able to enforce it. The power has always lied with the Republic, which is what Caesar feared, right? Which is what all of these actual authoritative governments had feared. And you can see it now in society as they fear that, which is why they're so hell-bent on continuing to jam down idiotic views and idiotic statements and controlling narratives. They're so hell-bent on getting those one after another after another. Have you realized they're not even they haven't let up since 2020? If it's not one thing and they realize it's not hitting the same chord, they just change it to something else. And then they change it to something else. It's just been one after another to completely create fear and decentralize the people from one another, to faction out individual beliefs based on politics, instead of saying, hey guys, you actually have a lot more in common, like pretty much everything else in common, than political beliefs. And guess what? They're bullshit. Political beliefs are bullshit anyways in today's society, because they're all kind of grabbing for the same agenda, which is power and money. It doesn't even matter. Think about the FDA, right? The FDA approves all these bullshit drugs, these pharmaceuticals, a ton of which get pulled off after they show adverse effects, but they get approved by the FDA first before they get pulled off the market. Well, a vast majority, and I can't remember the percentage, I think it's something around 70+% of the FDA's budget is actually given to them by pharmaceutical companies. And how many people actually know this? But the problem is that nobody looks into this and says, well, that's kind of fucked up, that maybe they shouldn't have any vested interest in an agency that gives approvals for pharmaceuticals that we then take. Maybe we should just stop taking this shit. Maybe we should actually come together as people and start actually having this individual thought and remove ourselves from the idiocracy or the sheep mindset that is being tossed out a lot nowadays. But it just baffles me that so many people are just being walked down this plank blindfolded, and they're not even realizing that their legs and their hands are free and they could turn around at any time.
And in line with Einstein's definition of true insanity, a lot of times when people are called out on this by the masses, they simply double down. We're going to do more of it. We saw that kind of after the election in Virginia, where the Republicans surprisingly won that state. You saw the other party, the Democrats, kind of double down on their positions, and the polls are reflecting it. Now, before we get too political here, I agree with what you just implied. I mean, you didn't say it in your out loud voice, but I will. I really think it's just one big party. I think they're more in cahoots than they are at odds. I think they just want us to be at odds. A lot of it is deflection. A lot of it is spinning a narrative that gets us to think about differences politically between us or racially between us, and perhaps not think one or two chess moves ahead and realize that the divide really is economically. It's a class divide, and that's not talked about. Now, pivoting over towards dating relationships and men and women, I will let you in on something, Johnny, since you're the guest on this show. We talk about the pressure on the family and how masculinity and femininity have been trivialized in the interest of either lowering the birth rate or taking the power away from men to be in charge of their own families. And then, in that dearth, who steps in? The government, right? I mean, I'm sure that's pretty heavy for a lot of people to hear, but when you think about it, that's exactly what the design must be. And you think, well, I don't know. But again, if you start looking at the big picture, these are the things that kind of occur to you. Now, as we were discussing before we hit record on this show, the Me Too movement several years ago sent a lot of men in a frenzy thinking, oh my God, if I even talk to a woman, I'm a predator. And kind of in line with that whole idiocracy theme and just how the emperor has no clothes, as we record this, the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is going on with practically zero fanfare. How can we give so much attention to a Kyle Rittenhouse and zero attention to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial? I mean, 3 years ago, the number one hashtag in the world was believe all women, stop this sexual assault on women. And now you have a situation where obviously one of the most notorious serial pedophiles in the world, his lieutenant, the woman who was basically, allegedly, right, his enabler, is on trial and nobody cares. How is that even possible? Right? But you dare say that out loud and people will just start parroting the narrative of what they've been told to care about right now. And you look on foxnews.com, you look on CNN.com, and the number one stories, if they're not flat out op-ed pieces, are what some primetime anchor on the other station did last night that was idiotic. That's not news.
No.
You know, that's marketing. You know, my wife and I were talking about this the other day. We're absolutely nonplussed by how the Kyle Rittenhouse trial became the biggest television event since OJ. I mean, really, honestly, it can only be because there's a narrative going where we have to really, really start fearing defending ourselves. Because if we do, this is what will happen to you. Now, do I believe Kyle Rittenhouse was at the wrong place at the wrong time? Absolutely. But this should never have been that big of a news story unless there was something they were training us to believe, which you know, goes for everything else. But vis-a-vis these other stories like Ghislaine Maxwell or the Arbery trial in Georgia was a minor news story compared to the Rittenhouse trial. And I believe that was a case of true racism in the Arbery case. And there's at least someone listening to this going, Arbery case, what's that? Exactly, is my response.
Yeah.
You know, you had 3 guys, white men, who killed a black guy in cold blood. And, you know, there's a lot of overtones of racism there. So why was this not a big, huge deal? Well, I mean, the only thing I can think of is if we start showing people what the real racists look like, then we can't play the narrative that everybody who isn't a person of color is a racist anymore, because it'll be obvious that there's a distinction to be made there. I don't know. That's the only thing I came up with. But again, you start reading the news for yourself. You start thinking for yourself. And most of all, wait for it. You start actually talking to real people in the real world instead of listening to the narrative that someone you don't even know, a stranger, is weaving for you. And you realize that black folks and white folks get along. Women aren't the enemy. They're not an alien creature. Most women actually would love to go out on a date with a guy who's heterosexual, if they're heterosexual, and get along and maybe someday have sex. It is only perhaps these angry people who have an interest in grabbing the mic and weaving a narrative who make the most noise. They're the squeakiest wheels out there. Meanwhile, the people who aren't angry are just living their lives. And we said this on the show before. So you have guys who are terrified of talking to women, even approaching them. It used to be because of what was commonly known as approach anxiety. Now, the number one reason why men aren't talking to women is because they fear they're bothering women, or they'll come off like some sort of predator for simply saying hello. And I think that's idiocracy. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to change us from being that, masculine man that women actually do enjoy being around, from having that confidence. Like, women want men to have confidence. They don't want the men to be feeble. They want them to be up and say, hey, I'd love to buy you a drink, or hey, I'd love to take you out for coffee sometime. I was, noticing you and just thought I'd come over and say hi. I mean, where did just pure honesty come out of the equation, right? And it doesn't matter how confident you are. If you're honest, you're going to have a better chance with women than just either coming up as a creep or not obviously saying anything. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And so when it comes to these things, though, when we talk about how men are just being, I don't know like the best term for it, but kind of beta-tized, if I was going to make one up for myself, is the sense that, it's just that men are so terrified from actually going and approaching women because of what they're being trained to believe, that men are evil in all these different ways. So guys, I mean, there's so many different routes to go on that, but I'm going to stick with this one right now, is that, guys are just being trained from the inception of what's going on in colleges nowadays, what's being taught in colleges to men, how men are being kind of programmed from college to now being, real men in the real world. This new generation of men are being told that all these things to approach a woman is to be hegemonic and controlling and dominating, to insert yourself, to think that a woman is just needs to stop her conversation, or even holding a door open for a woman nowadays is considered patronizing. It's just like, wow, When did we take away good manners and honesty from just being men and villainize those? And that's where we're at in today's society. That's what the media is doing. Like you said, the smallest group has got the biggest bullhorn, and the rest of us are just living our lives. But it doesn't matter because everybody else is paying attention. Everybody's paying attention to these media outlets. They're paying attention to what's being said, and they're believing the villainization of masculinity. They're believing the villainization of the male feminine role. And they're believing this, like, which is, this is what a lot of people aren't even talking about, but incredibly toxic to women, is to try to push them into these uber masculine roles. It's incredibly toxic to them. A lot of them are leading severely unhappy lives, but they're like, oh, I'm making a lot of money because I'm a boss lady and I own a business, but I'm completely unsatisfied sexually. I'm unsatisfied relationally. And it's because I can't get out of this masculine push that everybody's told me I have to be now because women are supposed to be that. Nobody's talking about how toxic that is for women's mindsets either. Just like men being pushed in over feminized ways are being misaligned with who they are as men, which is causing depression and it's causing confusion. It's the same thing for women. Women are being confused. I get so many women who ask me and ask my wife, where are all the real men out there? So with that feminization of men, though, we're starting to lose that masculine role that women have come so much to love. Now, while men do evolve, like if you look from generation to generation, men have evolved, right? And we have to embrace that evolution of masculinity in today's society. But to actually just feminize men is a completely different thing. And it's not near evolution, which is why women continue to ask us where the real men are in society today. Because guys are shying away from it. They're hiding from it. They're taught that it's not good, that it's unhealthy. Things like toxic masculinity, which in my opinion needs to be eradicated from the human vocabulary. But things like that are being tossed around as awesome hashtags in society today. This is a problem, and it's a problem for females too, because they're not able to find the partners that they're looking for. It's becoming harder for them to do that. It's becoming harder for them to have happy lives, happy marriages, and happy relationships. It's harder for them to feel sexually fulfilled, right? Because guys don't want to take control in the bedroom. And that's also another problem. But so much of this is starting to come out, and we're starting to see a really, really bad trend, in my opinion, in the way that things are going from that perspective, from the influences of media and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, when we talk about toxic masculinity in this culture, it's a weaponized term. It's yet another term that's very carefully crafted to weave a narrative. And that narrative is, hey, you know what, guys, your masculine nature is at its very essence evil and horrible. Get rid of it. Okay. And what we've talked about a lot on this show, Johnny, is men are told that, but not given anything to replace it with. We're just told to do better. Gillette commercial stuff from a couple years ago. And that's dangerous because this villainization of masculinity leaves a void, which only makes us neuter. So what happens is you have women taking up the mantle of what is actually virtuous masculinity, being a protector, being a provider. But they're women, they're not men. So just like men aren't particularly wired to be feminine, and this is unbelievably, what I'm about to say is incredibly, incredibly controversial nowadays. I mean, I may get a bad review or two on iTunes for uttering it, but men are wired to be masculine and women are wired to be feminine. And I think those driving the narrative know this, right? I mean, when men take on feminine roles, we get movies like Mr. Mom, and they're funny movies because they're ironic humor. So when women are left to take up masculinity, they're just not men. I'm not going to go so far as to say they don't do a good job at it or men are better at it, because that's probably perhaps too politically incorrect for even this show. I mean, look where we've come nowadays. But here's a shower thought for you, okay? A lot of people, and I mean, this is the collective they, right? I'm not really putting a face on this, but if you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you'll see a lot of people saying, hey, masculinity has evolved, to use the term that you're using. And they have positioned that term and spun it to mean it can be whatever you want it to be. Hey, Harry Styles in a dress is the new masculine. Now, here's my shower thought, as promised. If masculinity can be whatever I want it to be, if it's self-defined, then the term doesn't exist. The concept doesn't exist. If it's that nebulous to the point of being anything you want it to be, then there no longer is any masculinity because you can't define it. Anything that's a big old nothing burger doesn't exist. So basically, they've channeled masculinity into oblivion. Now, here's the crazy part. There's no battle against femininity. We're cool with feminine stuff. Women still know how to be feminine. Men can be feminine and brand themselves masculine. So now we are celebrating one side of this polarity while banishing the other side to Elba for eternity. It's just nuts. And yet, here's another example of where nobody's thinking a chess move ahead, saying, wait a minute, how can this possibly be the case, right? A couple of years ago, one of the most feminist celebrities, female celebrity, issued an apology because she was risking being the target of cancel culture for saying that women have vaginas. So she wanted to apologize to her trans sisters for not acknowledging that not all women have vaginas. I'll never forget what my lovely wife said to me when she heard about that story. She goes, she's a feminist, right? Right. Yeah. This is toxic masculinity. Men aren't so wonderful. The future is female, blah, 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 right? And I said, yeah. She goes, owned. That's the only word I have to say. She's just been owned by a bunch of men. And that was my wife who said that. You know, vagina owner, my wife, by the way, of course. And I didn't laugh because it's sad, you know? Now listen, I have taken up for trans causes in the past. I understand that not everybody is wired the way you and I and my wife and maybe a bunch of other people are, and I've got to respect people's differences. I once had to attempt, and I mean, it turned out I was shouted down for this, that, you know, when someone comes along and says they're an intersex transsexual and you're poking fun at them or saying you don't agree with their lifestyle choice, it's not a lifestyle choice. And I'm being shouted down. And I said to these people, you need to go look up what intersex means. This guy has had a very, very tough young life. And they didn't want to. They're like, I know what it means. I mean, if he wants to pretend he's the other gender, fine. I go, I'm just recusing myself from this conversation because people will not do any research anymore. They'll get in their little echo chamber and be comfy, right? And as a side note, lately, I've noticed that some of these people in said echo chambers even go so far to say that none of you people are doing any research. None of the things you're finding on the internet, none of your self-taught, self-thinking even counts anymore unless it's a scientist who's done a peer-reviewed study. So, I mean, you have even the masses piling on in this quest to dumb us all down, literally. But again, that's a side note. And you know, I am a man of faith, and I am a man of reasonable faith. And yet it's amazing to me how many people have been brainwashed by fear in the name of religion over the years. I mean, it's kind of a fact. Yet there are a lot of people who espouse a certain faith who want to deny that ever happened. And what we're seeing happen nowadays, and this is in line with me saying politics is the new religious faith, is people are being brainwashed and mind controlled by this new religion. And I just really think it's sad. And I think it's especially sad for the state of men and women in our relationships together. And I'll reiterate kind of to put a coda on this whole conversation, and I'll let you riff on this too. I'll let you get the last word here. That we should go out and just talk to women. Guys, if you're having a hard time approaching women, dating women, talk to women whether you're attracted to them or not, whoever they are. Talk to female human beings and just get to know the pattern of how they respond to you. And if you're not creepy, weird, or pushy, and you give them space and you make them feel comfortable and you're not sex focused. And by the way, as an aside, and I've repeated this on this show, but it bears repeating again, women, once their femininity is ignited by your masculine presence, which is your very nature, gentlemen, it's natural. You know, the root word of natural is nature. When that femininity is ignited by masculinity and you make them feel comfortable in your presence, the clothes fall off, okay? You don't have to push anything. When women feel comfortable around you and they sense that you're a masculine man who sexually polarizes them, you don't have to push for the sex stuff. I get these people who come to me, Johnny, and they're saying, oh, women hate sex and they're playing keep away with sex. Those guys are all being their worst enemy. They're doing something to inhibit women from feeling safe and comfortable or turned on in their presence. Go out and talk to women. Relax. Stop pushing for anything. Just be social with female human beings. Be social with people who don't look like you, don't pray like you, don't live in the same neighborhood you do, and then you will realize very quickly, especially if you get a passport and travel abroad, people are very human all over the world. And most people are very easy to get along with, and they don't want to create drama. They just want to be social and get along. What do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I love that line. People are very human. Yeah, we are. We're all human, guys. And to your point, I'll just give like an anecdotal like story from my life. I used to travel a lot outside of work when I was doing protection, and we'd get 30 days off, and I'd travel to different areas of the world. And I went down to Australia by myself, and I was just backpacking through Australia and New Zealand. And I made it a point to myself, and I challenged myself to say, hey, I'm going to meet somebody new every single night. So what would I do is I'd go out to bars, I'd have a beer, and I would introduce myself to a new group of people every night and just make friends. Didn't matter if it was a group of women or men or, you know, men and women. I would just make friends with them just to talk to people. This was before, like, this would have been probably around the time when iPhone had just come out. So it's not even really like, this was back like 08, 09 timeframe. So it wasn't really like the internet, the way everything is accessible through your phone. So I would just go out and talk to people to get to know people in a different area and make friends. And one night I made friends with a group of girls. I wasn't trying to hit on them, just made friends with them. And some guys invited them to a bar. And they were like, hey, we're going to go over to this other bar. You know, did you want to come? And I was like, yeah, I didn't really like the feeling of those guys. So I'm going to go with you guys just to kind of keep an eye on everything. Sure enough, we go to this shady, sleazy ass bar. It's riddled with a bunch of dudes playing pool. These are the only group of women there. And I'm like, oh, okay, this will be fun. So I get there and I just hung out with them, had some beers with them, and kind of played protector all night, not seeking any sex. And it didn't end in any sex, just had friends, just was trying to be a good person in the world. And that turned out to be a great decision because these guys were trying to get them to come into a car and like go somewhere else. And so I took them away from that situation. And then everybody went home safe that evening. But the whole point of that was to solidify, you know, your position is that just talk to people, get to know people, be there for people as being a human being, as being a man in this world, and just learn about them. And like you said, with that, more confidence is going to come. And with that, people are going to start to trust you and feel safe with you. And whether it's the fact that you're trying to get women to like you more, that is going to de facto happen in your life. But first of all, you just got to be a human being again. You got to remember that the world isn't through virtual reality. The world isn't through the internet. The world is right in front of you, and you're not participating right now. So be a participant in it. And so just to kind of hammer that point home, I truly believe in that. I truly believe in the value of getting back to being a man in this world, to being a person in this world, and start putting away this technology for a little bit. Start experiencing life again as a human being.
100%, man. And listen, the video games aren't real life. Burying your face in your electronics, people getting together, and they're on their iPhones while sitting next to each other, you know, instead of socializing with real, actual human beings. Wake up, man. I think, you know, the title of this particular show could be Wake Up, right?
Yeah.
Start thinking a couple chess moves ahead. In the situation you talked about, Johnny, I'm guessing apart from whether actual sex acts occurred or not, those women found you more interesting, ultimately. I'm just laying my chips on the table and betting that. Yeah, for sure. His name is Johnny Elsasser. He is the host of the Art of Masculinity podcast. You can go to his website and find out all about him, what he's up to, and grab a listen to his wonderful show, which I've indeed been a guest on before, by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/Johnny. Can you believe in 280 some episodes. We've never had a Johnny on before. He's the first. MountainTopPodcast.com/Johnny, and you can check in with him and start binge listening to the Art of Masculinity. Johnny Elsasser, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating and indeed a fun conversation.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you too. And gentlemen, when you go over to MountainTopPodcast.com, you can check out our sponsors, Origin in Maine. Oh yeah, Jocko Willing's company will offer you the best boots and jeans you have ever worn. 100% USA made in their factory in Maine. And if you've ever seen the videos or had a chance to go visit up there, man, it's a neat place. It's so old school. It'll just make you want to wear the jeans and the boots more. I wear mine almost everywhere. My pairs of Origin jeans are well worn at this point. Great stuff. And from Origin Labs, you can also get the best protein powder you've ever used and a lot of great supplements, including a fantastic vitamin D3, which acts as a nice prophylactic against COVID, by the way, guys. All that's there for you when you go to MountainTopPodcast.com/Origin. You can also visit my friend Lucas Rui over at Hero Soap. Get the best body wash you've ever had. If you have not taken a shower with a woman using this body wash yet, you need to. I'm just going to put a period on the end of that sentence and send you to MountainTopPodcast.com/Hero Soap. When you visit either Origin or Hero Soap, use the coupon Mountain10 to get 10% off. Guys, we're coming to the close of 2021. 2022 is a new year. Things are going to open up even more next year. Get out and talk to some women. If you want some direct one-on-one coaching to help you get into that state of mind so you can start living the dream in the way we should be as men with real live red-blooded women, give me a call. Get on my schedule by going to MountainTopPodcast.com. Sign up to talk to me for free for 25 minutes. If it goes a little bit beyond that, that's fine too. What I want for you is to enjoy success with the greatest woman you've ever met. That's what I've been doing for the last 16 years. I got the love of my life right by my side through life. We go on adventures together. And yes, our marriage, our relationship is exactly what it seems. I don't need you to be me, however. Your vision of your relationship with the right woman may be dramatically different than mine, and that is completely cool. But it all starts with your 25-minute call with me to put a plan of action in place to get what you want, because you deserve what you want. There's that phrase again, right, that we talk about so often around here. MountainTopPodcast.com is the place, and I look forward to talking to you real soon. And until I talk to you again on this show real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.